holidays. I'm going to talk to you now about the books that I've read recently. Let's get into it. Okay, first I want to talk about A Good Girl's Guide for Murder. That whole trilogy. I listened to the audiobooks for all 3 books at the end of October. I had a lot of fun listening to them. This series is about a teenage girl. Pip is investigating the murder of this girl named Andy, who's just a few years older than her, and they say that Andy's boyfriend killed her. But Pip doesn't think that's true. And so she decides to look into it. She decides to investigate. That's what kicks off this whole trilogy of murder mysteries and this girl named Pip investigating them. Like I said, I like mysteries. I ate it up. I really, really, really enjoyed listening to the audiobook because there's like a whole cast of like voice actors for this audiobook, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a lot of fun. This series made me feel so smart because I guessed who done it before Pip ever figured it out. For all 3 books, I was like, call me Sherlock Holmes. Did I figure out why or like exactly what happened? No, but I figured out who, so that's the most important part, right? And it made me feel smart. Something else I do want to mention is that the 3rd book takes a turn that I was not expecting. If you've read it, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. And I can respect Holly Jackson's choice to change things up, you know, shake it up a little bit for the 3rd book. You know, she's already done 2 murder mysteries. Like, we get it. Like, maybe that might get boring. Let's switch it up for the 3rd book. Go out with a bang. I can respect that. The specific choice that she made with this book stressed me out, okay? It stressed me out so much. Until I finished the 3rd book, I had a hard time focusing on anything else or even sleeping. I just felt a lot of secondhand stress, okay? There was a lot of stress in that book and I was just feeding off of it. So just be aware of that. If you are very empathetic, especially with fictional characters, you may feel very stressed out reading As Good as Dead. Just a warning. All right, next we have A Tale Dark and Grim. This book follows Hansel and Gretel as they traipse through a bunch of fairy tale like stories, learning important lessons. You do have a retelling of the like original Hansel and Gretel story that we all know. That's just like one of the stories that takes place in here. All of the other stories, they're kind of new fairy tales. And like I said, they are a little bit dark, a little bit twisted, but not like so dark and twisted as like the original Grimm's brother fairy tales. Because like if you've read those, you know those are like creepy. These ones are more like Tim Burton level, twisted, creepy, but like ultimately not scary, you know? You know what I mean? So yeah, I really liked this book. I thought it was a lot of fun. The narrator in this book is its own character. The narrator will pop in and out of the story and be like, hey, just a warning, something creepy is about to happen, or like, you know, with like commentary like that. I think it's fun when the narrator has a personality, and so I liked this book a lot. Although you do have like the same 2 main characters going in and out of all these stories, it is very like a episodic anthological feel, a fairy tale collection kind of feel, where like if you picked this up and read one of the chapters out of the middle, you wouldn't be too lost, because it does feel very much like it's a book that's just a collection of fairy tales. So I liked it. I thought it was fun. All right, the last book I read in October was Mexican Gothic. This book I got because after reading Carmilla for my Halloween read-a-thon, I wanted to read something spooky, something supernatural, something gothic. So I found this book, I got it, I read it. It was spooky, it was supernatural, it was gothic, it was creepy, and I loved it. In this book, we have our main character whose name is Noemi, and she goes to check on her cousin who has recently moved in with her new husband and his family and has sent a letter home asking her family to save her. So Noemi goes and it's like, okay, what's going on in here? Why do you need to be saved from your husband? So she goes and finds that creepy things are indeed happening. It is very spooky. I'm speechless. It's creepy, and I loved it. Okay, next I read Book of a Thousand Days by Shannon Hale. I mentioned this in my last video, but I'll give you a quick recap of this. This is based on a fairy tale where a girl gets trapped in a tower because she doesn't want to marry who her father wants her to marry. But this book goes into like how she gets out of the tower, how she then falls in love with the prince, and all of that happens after the tower. I read this because it was a reread for me and I wanted to check off that space on the Bloomin read-a-thon bingo card. And something I don't think I mentioned in my Bloomin read-a-thon TBR video is that this is based on a fairy tale, but the setting is switched up. It's not set in like a medieval Europe setting. It's instead set in like ancient Mongolia, which is just an interesting twist to it that I think is interesting and fun. So there's that. If you like fairy tales, check it out. I do indeed like fairy tale retellings, which leads me into another fairy tale feeling book, and that is The Daughter of the Moon Goddess. Okay, this book is about a girl who's the daughter of the moon goddess. She's not supposed to exist. And so this is complicated. Her mother is exiled, and the people who exiled her, who imprisoned her on the moon, start to feel that like maybe there's something going on up there. And so this girl needs to flee her home. She needs to leave her mother for her mother and her safety. And so she flees and finds herself in the royal court of the people who have exiled her mother, who have imprisoned her mother. She finds herself in this court, and it's about all of that. So this whole adventure and has a very fairy tale flavor to it. It is based on like Asian folklore, fairy tales, mythology, that kind of stuff. So it's a different kind of fairy tale flavor than like the Western Brothers Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, but I like that. A fairy tale is a fairy tale. There's, princes and princesses and some magic, and I'm happy with it. Okay? All right. Next, In a Glass Grimly. This is the sequel to A Tale Dark and Grim. I didn't like this one as much as the first, but I think it's because I expected it to be just like the first, and it was not.
Well, now I have an analogy for you. This book is like a Disney live action remake. In theory, I should have loved this book because I loved the original, and this is very similar. It follows Jack and Jill through a bunch of fairy tale like stories as they learn lessons, but these are kind of dark, twisted fairy tales, just like the first book, right? So I should have liked it because similar kind of feel, similar kind of theme. Should have liked it. I did not, because just like Disney live action remakes, it was simultaneously trying to be exactly the same as the first one while also being completely different. And so that contradiction of like trying to be unique while also trying to be exactly the same as the first was like, it doesn't work. It doesn't ever work. And I also felt like with this one, it was more childish. The humor was much more childish. And I get that this is a trilogy of children's books, but considering how much I enjoyed the first one, I thought that this one would be similar, I thought that, it won't be so bad. The first one was good, but I think this one really, you need to be a kid to enjoy it. And it's the same with Disney live action remakes. Sorry, not sorry.
Sometimes books don't meet our expectations, and that's okay. Speaking of expectations, a book that did meet my expectations and even exceeded my expectations is Heartstopper. This is a graphic novel about two teenage boys who become friends and then fall in love, and I thought it was so cute. As soon as I finished the first one, I had to read the other three because it was just such a cute story with such cute characters that I didn't want to stop being around those characters. And also because it is a graphic novel, even though it's 263 pages, I blasted through all 263 pages in about an hour. So I was like, okay, that was too fast. Too fast. So I went to the library and I got the other three the next day and blasted through those equally as quickly as the first. And all four are like really cute, really adorable. The fourth one will get you on the heartstrings because that one deals with some serious topics. And going back to the third Heartstopper, we're introduced to some discussions of depression and anxiety, as well as like a little hint of an eating disorder. And in the fourth one, it really dives deep into those topics. If you struggle with those things, beware that the third and fourth Heartstopper do address those topics. But even then, I feel both of those books handled these things really well and like really sensitively. And so I appreciated that like, I don't know, in this world now, like we all struggle with various things, many things. And so it's just discussing how you love somebody who's struggling with something like that. I thought it was sweet and I thought it was cute. And yes, did it like rip my heart up a little bit? Yes, but I thought it was also really sweet. And after I finished all four, I watched the Netflix series, which I also thought was great, and I also highly recommend. The casting is phenomenal, so good. I think Nick and Charlie are cast perfectly. I like that the Netflix series dives deeper into the friend group and like the backgrounds of each of Nick and Charlie's friends, because the series only covers the first three books, and so I'm interested to see how they address the events of book four, because that's where this series gets its heaviest. All right, moving on. I listened to the audiobook for Circe, and just getting straight to it, if I hadn't listened to the audiobook, I would have DNF'd this book, because this book, little background, this book is about Circe from Greek mythology. She is most well known for being in the Odyssey and turning Odysseus and his crew into pigs. She is a sorceress, an immortal sorceress. And so this book covers her whole life, the background leading up to her turning Odysseus and his men into pigs, and then also her life beyond that, after that. Right? So we're talking about an immortal being, right? Who's lived thousands of years, right? It felt like I was reading this book for thousands of years. There you go. That's how I felt. It's not a good feeling. I don't think anybody wants to feel that way when reading a book, but that's how I felt when listening/reading this book. And that's why I say, if I were reading this book, I would have DNF'd it. Because for me to read a book, I need to be 100% engaged in it, or else I'm just going to set it down and go do something else and never pick it up again. I have to be somewhat engaged in it. Whereas if I'm listening to an audiobook and my attention starts to slip, I start to get bored, I'll just start doing the laundry, or doing chores, or doing something else while I'm listening to it. And it's still on in the background. I'm still getting the story, but I'm not really focusing on it. So that's what happened with this book most of the time. So yeah, there's my review of Circe by Madeline Miller. I was just in the mood for Greek mythology retellings this month, because right after reading Circe, even though I felt like it took forever to read, I was like, you know what, let's give this another shot. And I listened to Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This book is about Ariadne, the princess who helped Theseus navigate the labyrinth and kill the Minotaur. So in the original Greek myth, after she helps Theseus get through the labyrinth and all that, he abandons her, and then she ends up getting married to Dionysus. This book, although it was the same length as Circe, did not feel like it was the same length as Circe. I feel like the pacing was a lot better, and I just didn't get as bored as quickly. There were some parts where I did get a little bit bored, but I feel like overall, compared to Circe, it was much better. I also really liked the love story between Ariadne and Dionysus. I thought that was cute, and it felt organic, that they just kind of ran into each other, and he decided to help her out because she was in a tough situation, and then they kind of became friends, and then they kind of like each other, and it just felt kind of organic and natural, and I liked that. I like it when a love story feels natural like that. Another thing I liked about this book also shifts between Ariadne's perspective and her little sister's perspective. Even though they grew up in the same house with the same parents, with the same siblings, with the same people around them, they grew up to be different people. They were affected by those experiences differently, and I think that was just an interesting theme to think about as the story went on, as it progressed, as they both progress into adulthood, as they both get married, as they both start having children. It's just interesting to see how their childhoods and how their different perspectives on their childhood affect them as adults. And I thought that was interesting. I was sad by the ending of this because it has a sad ending, and I don't think it needed to. After reading this book, I looked into it a little bit, and Ariadne's death is disputed. There are a bunch of different myths that just made the ending even more sad to me personally, and kind of frustrated me. I did enjoy it, but the ending did kind of put a damper on that book for me. I just got distracted by George because he's just being ridiculously adorable right now. Anyway, the last book I have to talk about is What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing by Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey. I listened to the audiobook for this. I liked the audiobook a lot because it's a conversation between the two authors, right? And I would say that this is a good introduction into trauma and stuff. I feel a lot of books that delve into psychology can get very textbooky, can get very they tell you the definition to this thing once and then just expect you to remember it through the whole book. And this book was really nice because I feel Oprah acted as the normal person in the conversation, just saying, hey, wait, could you remind me what that means again? Okay, great, thanks. She's asking these questions to this psychologist, this expert on trauma and child development, and so her interjections kind of helped me remember all of the stuff that I was learning and picking up as I was reading it. And also she's sharing personal stories that also just help me to remember all of the different terms and all of the different things that I'm learning. So I really like that. So yeah, if you're interested in like trauma and psychology and the psychology of trauma and how it affects our brains and all of that, I would highly recommend giving this one a listen or a read. Those are all of the books that I've read in November and the very end of October. This is what my Bloomin' read-a-thon bingo card ended up looking like at the end of November. I had a lot of fun participating in that read-a-thon this month, and I read a lot of good books that I had a lot of fun with. So let me know down below any books that you've read recently that you would recommend, that you want me to read sometime, because I'd love to hear your recommendations. And without further ado, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for listening to me ramble about books, and I will talk to you in my next one. Bye. Oops, got distracted. A Good Girl's Guide for Murder. Bloomin' read-a-thon Minotaur? Minotaur? I have to catch my breath.